Hello, everyone, and welcome back to We're Talking About Stuff. I'm Layla.
And I'm Michael.
Today, we're talking about ADHD
Hmm.
because you have ADHD. I do not have ADHD, at least I don't think so.
Yeah.
However, I do work with a lot of clients who have it, and I know that it's just growing amongst the youth.
Yeah.
Lots of children have ADHD now.
Yeah. It's hard to tell if that's because of like more people just being diagnosed or
Mhm.
whether it happens more. And I honestly have zero idea which it is.
Yeah. And I think that we're going to talk about this, like the impact of technology and social media. But I also think the foods in America might be a problem
Yeah.
because, yeah, I think that's a big part of, what you're putting into your body. I would imagine changes things it does change things about your DNA and chemistry and stuff. So I don't know. I think that's a big problem too. Like the dyes, recently the red dye was banned,
Oh yeah.
red, one of them.
Number three, is that it?
Number three, yeah, but there's
I
still
can't
like
I
red 40 or
don't quote don't quote me on anything I say about that. I could be totally wrong.
I think red three is right.
Yeah.
That was banned, but it's been banned in like all these other countries
Mm.
and America's behind it, but there's still all like blue 10 or I don't know the numbers, but blue, yellow,
Yeah.
red. Yeah. Well, anyways, when were you diagnosed with ADHD?
I was diagnosed like way before they even called it ADHD. I don't know
Mm.
how my mom knew to take me to like get me I love having an ADHD moment while talking about ADHD.
It
What
probably
was it
makes it
called?
worse,
Yeah.
like because you're talking about it.
Yeah. Can I tell you like in true ADHD style, totally change the subject
Yeah.
for a second? This morning I was talking to ChatGPT, like the voice thing, about our topics for today. Like, oh, I want to kind of get my head around like what we might talk about. And then the next thing you know, I'm talking about farts to ChatGPT.
Really?
Yeah.
Why though?
Well, now I have to reveal that. Well, we've talked about like bodily functions before. My camera is still blurring out. Let me just change it. So I farted while I was talking to GPT,
Okay.
and I was like, "Can you hear it when I fart?" And then I had a whole thing where I was like, because if anyone's wondering, it can't. Um, this is too much, but I was going on and on and on talking about all this other stuff unrelated. I was like, "Wait, what was I doing?" Oh, I was talking, trying to get some information, like some ideas about an ADHD episode, which is perfect.
That's so funny.
Um,
It probably can hear. Like
yeah,
it maybe doesn't recognize that, but
yeah, I'm sure
it
it picks
hears
it up.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's so
yeah.
funny.
Um, so where were we? Well, we were talking about when I got diagnosed.
Yeah, and I think the word you were looking for was evaluation, like getting an
Yeah.
evaluation for your.
Um, so I was evaluated for like learning disabilities at the time.
Mhm.
They didn't really have like I did some research on this a while back. They didn't call it ADHD yet, and they hadn't really even identified it as a single thing. They were kind of like trying to figure out what was going on with certain kids.
Mhm.
So that's when I got diagnosed. I must have been probably in elementary school. And
And okay, sorry, go ahead.
uh, now I'm like, wait, what were you gonna ask?
No, I was gonna ask I know ADD is attention deficit disorder.
Yeah,
What is the difference between that and ADHD? And honestly, what's the H? Hyper?
hyperactive or
Hyperactive?
hyperactivity,
Okay.
attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Okay.
Uh,
So
I
what's
think
the difference
I
between the
think
two?
it's all under the same umbrella now.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
this is one of those things that I may be not exactly right on. But there are different types of ADHD. One is the more hyperactive, which hence the hyperactivity. And then the other is the one that I have, which is,
Hmm.
oh, I can't think of the word for this either, but it's more of like when I get overwhelmed, instead of getting hyper, when I get overstimulated, I shut off. And it's more of
Got
like
it.
avoidance, like, okay, this is too much. Like, I'm just
I
gonna,
see.
now it kind of comes out as me like scrolling Facebook for like an endless period of time, losing track of time, and just kind of
I
like,
see.
yeah. Um,
Okay.
I wish I could think of the name of that. that other type?
I was just gonna ask you if you were given meds. Like, was it Adderall at that point, or
I was Ritalin, and I
okay?
think like a lot of times I have these sort of memories of how my life was that
Hmm.
I honestly, as I say it out loud, I'm like, wait a second, I don't really know that that's true, but I definitely know I was on Ritalin. I remember vividly what the pills looked like,
Hmm.
but I don't think there was any other medication yet. I don't think Adderall existed yet.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, so I was on Ritalin for like most of elementary school, middle school, into high school, and then inexplicably, my mom took me off of it and then was so surprised when I started flunking out of all my classes and I
Hmm.
couldn't graduate. I had to take summer school that year so I could
Wow.
graduate high school.
Then
Uh,
you went back on.
yeah, I went back on when I was probably in my 30s, probably early
Oh,
30s.
wow.
Yeah, I had a student, a piano student who had ADHD, and I was talking to the mom about it, and I said, "Oh, I had it when I was like, it was one of those moments like, yeah, I guess I did have that." And the mom said, "Well, I have it." Like getting her daughter evaluated made her realize, like, "Oh, wait a second, I have these same symptoms." And she got
Hmm.
herself evaluated. So that kind of inspired me to go and there's a center, I think it's called the Center for Adult Attention Problems, something like that in Houston,
Hmm.
because I was still kind of newly sober. So I was kind of hesitant to like start taking this medication. So I
Yeah.
wanted to go and be like, okay, I want to get like the full evaluation. Like, I want to make sure I have this before I start taking medication for it. So I did. It was like a week's worth of like visits and tests, and they had like work like these different questionnaires. I gave one to my mom, one to my boss, because her husband actually had ADHD. So I
Hmm.
felt comfortable talking to her about it. So all these different, they gathered all this information. They were like, inattentive. That's the word I couldn't think of before.
Hmm.
The type of ADHD that I have.
Got it.
So I went through all this stuff to make sure I had it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you got it." So I started
Hmm.
taking medication again.
And what were the symptoms you had, like as a child and even into, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but
Yeah, I think part of it is just I I, I think because you and I communicate about money so much, I feel like that's a good place to kind of like talk about symptoms. Like the it's really hard for me to see the big picture. Like
hmm.
I'm very motivated by immediate gratification or instant gratification. So like a lot of my spending and like sort of, you know, in like my tax issues, all these different things that I'm just struggle to stay on top of um, are symptoms of the ADHD. You know, it feels something feels overwhelming. Even like so I have a lot of dental issues, which are actually getting better because I've been getting better treatment in general for my ADHD.
Hmm.
Um, I have all these. So I didn't go to the dentist for years, and then I started having cavities, and then the problem just kept getting worse and worse. And instead of that motivating me to do something about it, I instead did the opposite thing of like just ignoring it and like it just being too hard to like make an appointment and go to the dentist and sort of face it. I don't know if that seems like a vague way to sort of talk about it.
And that was related to like just avoidance. Is that maybe a symptom
Yeah.
of?
I mean, I think there's a lot of like sort of emotional stuff that goes along with it too. Like, because growing up with even having been diagnosed, a lot of things like that I would struggle with staying on top of. I guess like a lot of the symptoms of ADHD can seem like, oh, you're just lazy. Like, why are you being so lazy? Just get up and do this thing. When really
Mhm.
it's like there's a lot going on in my head about this thing that's keeping me from, like it's really hard to explain it. I just had this moment like it's hard to explain what that is.
I think that's why it's so hard for me to understand it.
Yeah.
Like, because I think I have some form. So what I spoke with a friend recently, like in the last few weeks, we were just talking about like things that really bother me. And sometimes I think like maybe I'm this is going to sound so annoying, but like autism, for example,
Yeah.
they're very sensitive to like sounds. Like obviously certain people on the spectrum are sensitive to sounds or like yeah, just certain things like that. And that's I'm very sensitive to certain sounds. Like my boyfriend will he probably can't hear it, but like any sort of picking noise or um if the TV's too loud while somebody's trying to talk to me, like that really I can't do it, you know?
Yeah.
Or if people rub their feet together or scratching your skin, anything like that, like makes my skin crawl. So she was saying, she's like a doctor, and she was saying, oh, that's just your like you're neurodivergent. And I'm like, oh, you know, so I don't experience any of the like I can focus on things. I don't struggle with like seeing the big picture. So like what you're describing, I don't go through, but there are some things that are like that's probably not normal because I don't like for my boyfriend is like something's wrong with you, you know,
Oh
because
yeah.
I'm like shut up. But yeah, I don't know what that is.
It's interesting you said because it's crossed my mind a lot recently about myself of like,
Hmm.
and now I can't even think of what any of those symptoms are, but every now and then I'm like, is that autism? Do I have like,
Yeah.
yeah, because I have some sound things and I have like this really strong sense of like people being considerate or like following like societal rules. So things
Hmm.
like people walking on the wrong side of the sidewalk and just
Hmm.
powering through. I'm like, how do they not know you're supposed to stay to the right? Like things like
Yeah.
that that make me like too aggravated. Like
Yeah.
thing that people that I need to learn, and I have learned to let go of it. I used to not be able to like sort of operate in the same
Yeah.
because I'd be constantly like, oh, rule breaker, like really getting
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm kind of the same way. Like it won't bother me for a long time, but like when people do things that are not the correct way, like
yeah,
come on. I think it's more so just being considerate. Like when it really bothers me when people aren't considerate of other people or even like lacking compassion or just like empathy, understanding of things like that. That doesn't, I don't understand how people don't feel that way. Like when I see something that really, really bothers me is when people throw trash out their car window. Like they're like, "Oh, I ate my Chick-fil-A," and they just throw it out the window. I see that
yeah,
so often. Like, what? I want to honk at them, but I don't because I know that that can cause trouble. But
yeah.
things like that. But that's probably going off topic. I don't know if it's related.
I'm exactly the same way though. I'm like, because I start thinking like, how does this person not notice that like, oh, this is the whole world? Like, how does it happen that someone is really just like, oh yeah, I just
Yeah.
like I don't understand.
No, consider it like that's how you treat Earth. You know, like I don't
Yeah,
know. Yeah, that bothers
yeah,
me. But I don't know if that's anything to do with autism or I don't think I'm autistic, but there are definitely things that I'm sensitive to that other I notice other people are not. So
yeah,
yeah, the sounds, usually sounds.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, even like right now, they're hopefully you don't hear them. They're talking in the hallway, and that's like I have my headphones on, so that helps.
Yeah.
But
I don't hear it. It's not coming
okay,
through.
good. Yeah, but I'm like that sounds really overwhelming to me. Like it's very distracting, and it feels like I have to scream. Yeah,
Oh, I'm
yeah.
the same way about some of that stuff. But
So
yeah,
what does that say about me? I don't know.
it could be that you just don't like hearing loud
Yeah,
noises.
yeah.
Yeah.
What about other symptoms? Do you know like what typically people go through who have ADHD?
Now that I'm in a relationship, and I've been in the relationship for like 6 years now, so I guess I should stop acting like it's new. But really, it's my first long-term relationship in my entire life.
Hmm.
I had another one that was like a year and a half, 2 years, so I guess that's long as well. But there are a lot of things that like I have a really hard time with managing my emotions. Like there'll be times like, and we talked about this in our uh, money meeting this week, where I like, what am I like? If I start feeling over, like, oh, things like cooking. Here's a good thing. Like,
Hmm.
if I'm gonna cook something, I kind of have to work hard to keep the like plan in my mind and like stay on task.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of energy. So like I don't do this as much as I did before, but if my boyfriend comes in the kitchen and starts asking me, I remember one time he asked me something that was fully unrelated while I was cooking, and I turned around, I was like, "Why are you asking me that right now?" Like really mad, like what the trying
Yeah.
to censor myself, and it made me like really mad, and I
Hmm.
was like, "What just happened?" And I because I think it's partly why I wasn't in relationships because I just it's really hard to kind of be nice a lot of the time. I don't know how
Yeah.
to describe it. So like when I'm at home or like doing my own thing, it's like if I sort of get agitated about something not going right or this kind of thing, I'm by myself and I can kind of just be an asshole by myself. So
Hmm.
I think it takes a lot of kind of like relearning how like okay, so you can't just snap at your boyfriend for asking
Yeah.
a question. You need to figure out how to handle this.
And is that more so because he's like interrupting you trying to focus? Like you're trying to focus so hard that it angers you, or is it
Yeah,
something else?
I think so. And it's like I'm much better about this than I used to be. And I think he's much better about being like, okay, he's cooking right now. I'll just stay in the other room. I think it's like being thrown off course. Like it just takes a lot of energy to stay on top of things. And I think I have a really, there's a thing that I don't know a ton about that often goes along with ADHD called rejection sensitive dysphoria.
Mhm.
And and it's kind of this thing. I noticed it when I first started dating. I would keep trying not to say his first name. I don't know why. When I first started dating my boyfriend, that I was really like any kind of thing that would happen. And my roommate at the time kind of was like, "Okay, so you're freaking out about nothing right now." I'd be like, "What do you think this text means?" Like he'd texted me something, and I would think it was like something really rude, or he was like rejecting me. And
Mm.
then I remember one of them I showed to her. I was like, "Can you believe like he just what do you think of this?" And she was like, it looks like a just a regular text. Like maybe he's busy or something, but it doesn't seem rude." And I was like, "No, no, no. This is definitely different." Like and it's a thing that really amplifies like something that could be perceived as a rejection. And I kind of have gotten out of that, thankfully, because it was kind of miserable. Like for a good probably 6 months to a year, I was constantly like really freaking out about things. Um,
Yeah.
but I think there's a part of me with that cooking thing that I don't want to mess it up. Like if
Hmm.
I screw up this food I'm cooking, like then like it feels like it's going to be a really terrible thing when
I
really
see.
isn't. Yeah.
Yeah. And your medication, does it, have you ever like recently been off of your medication at all or like missed a dose and like felt that difference?
It's been a while, like,
Okay.
but there were long periods, like after I moved to New York, I didn't have insurance for a long time, so I didn't have medication during that time period. And that's the thing
Hmm.
that's really challenging about having ADHD. Like my doctor at the time said, "Oh yeah, here's I'll refer you to a psychiatrist so you can get your prescription from him or them,
Hmm.
whoever." But I couldn't make the appointment. Like it was just
I
like,
see.
it's an extra thing that I just couldn't get myself to do.
Hmm.
So for a long time, I just wasn't getting treated with medication. And then ultimately, probably 3 or 4 years ago, I kind of got my medical care in order and like kind of have a system going. So I'm making my appointments and regularly and that kind of thing. So I've been treated for a long time.
Hmm. And does it help you focus? Like, is that the main goal with the medication or?
Yeah, I think the thing that helps me with the most is being able to prioritize. Like, I think, and I like to, there are a lot of things that I want to be doing, but often, even with medication, I like, it's too hard to pick the thing to do next.
Hmm.
It feels like everything is just like a big blob. And I think that's executive function, which is the part of the brain that doesn't do so well when you have ADHD, of being able
Hmm.
to like, okay, so the next thing, the next highest priority to do is this thing. But for me, especially when I'm not medicated, it just is a big blob that's too scary to look at. So I tell myself like, oh, I'm just gonna like take a break right now and look at Facebook. And then I
Hmm.
just look at Facebook
I
until
see.
like the next concrete thing comes up. So it definitely helps. And I notice in the mornings, especially after I've taken
Hmm.
it, there's a block of time that I'm like, okay, let's go, let's go. And I'm really good at like kind of being able to prioritize when I like kind of get engaged
Yeah.
and start working.
Yeah. I think because we are going to talk about technology and social media, I think that causes lack of focus just in general for everybody. Even for myself, I can
Hmm.
notice, like it feels like you're relaxing, I suppose, if you're just
Oh yeah.
scrolling, but that's not really the case. And it like all this social media and technology, it knows how to distract us and it knows how to keep us distracted. So I
Yeah.
just feel like it doesn't help anybody. But do you think that plays a role in
Yeah,
everything?
it's a double-edged sword. Is that the like cliche I want to use? I think
Hmm.
so because it works perfectly to like as a distraction tool, right? To keep me like, let me just look at this for a while and then it
Hmm.
just keeps me it I don't know what I would call it. But the other side of it is it's really helpful. Like I think it's social media for me that's kind of the bad part of the double-edged sword that kind of
Yeah.
drains. But there's so much about technology that helps me with things that I couldn't really handle before, or I was
Hmm.
challenged to handle before.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can definitely tell, like watching shows, I think I feel like, well, reading a book actually is where I would really notice it. And I love reading, but it takes me a long time to get into it because
Mm.
I'll read a couple pages and then be like, oh, I just read 2 pages, but I wasn't listening to what I was reading in a way.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking about a million other things. I have no idea what I just read. So I have to go back and like reread things a lot.
Yeah. That
Um,
happens to me here and there, but it's
yeah,
like because I'm thinking of something, but I usually don't have that problem with
yeah.
reading.
It's a a thing with ADHD that's really interesting is I can also hyper focus even on reading where
Hmm.
like once I get into it, I'm like, oh my God, I want to see what happens next. And then I don't do that at all. And I really focus on the book,
Hmm.
sometimes the detriment of other things that should be happening in
I
my life.
see. Yeah. I'll do that too, though. If a
Yeah.
book is good enough, I'm like, I'm staying up.
Yeah.
The other day I was supposed to be editing, but I was like, I need to know what happens. But that's just because the book,
Yeah.
like, I just love reading. It's like, I'm gonna keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
Or if I really have to get something done, I'll usually prioritize that and then be like, oh, this will be my reward to read the
Oh,
book.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think
So,
that is a really interesting thing because sometimes I'm like, I'll tell myself I'm going to give myself a reward and then be like,
hmm.
you know what? I'm just doing the reward.
Yeah, and
Like
that's
I'm not
fine
doing
though.
that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think
Yeah.
it just it's harder to keep that from happening.
Hmm.
But I mean, I can't even really compare that because I don't know what your experience is. Like now that I said, I'm like, I have no idea if it's harder for me to 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 stick to something like that.
Sometimes it is like because the other day, yeah, it was like I need to edit, so I need to do that first before I read, but I was like, I'm just gonna read. Like it's
Yeah.
not nothing's that serious and I'm not a life-saving doctor. So for me to pause on editing, it's like it's okay if I read right now. So I think I like justify it in that sense, but I don't think it has really anything to do with like not being able to. It's
Yeah.
just, yeah, the discipline around it, I suppose. I just don't care sometimes.
Yeah, this is such a good, like all of our conversations. This is really good for me to kind of start rethinking things.
Hmm.
Because in my video, I think I don't mention my ADHD as much as I did in the beginning of my YouTube channel. I always struggle with like, what's that line between, in reference to ADHD, like, what's the line between this being a reason why I struggle with finances and it being an excuse for like
Hmm.
struggling with finances? It's often hard to tell exactly what I guess what the difference is. No, I
Hmm.
guess an excuse would be like, well, I am doing this thing overspending, getting a lot of takeout, whatever, because I have ADHD, and letting that be an excuse to continue doing it. I
Hmm.
guess a reason is more about being in the process of changing the behavior. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's this is like just using takeout as just a random example. An excuse is like giving me a reason to keep doing the behavior, and a reason is
Hmm.
sort of trying to strategize about how to change the behavior. I think I just figured
Yeah.
out what I mean right there.
Yeah. I think that what it really comes down to is some of the financial problems may have been because of ADHD, but it also, you built these habits around finances that are hard to break as well. So it's like two things kind of working against you, where it's like you have to
Yeah.
break that habit, also keep in mind that you have ADHD, and yeah, the two of them mixed is makes it harder to come out of
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah. I have a specific finance thing. Should we go to that section?
yeah, yeah, I'd love to hear like how it affected your financial situation.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a combination, like you were saying, of habits, kind of, I think a lot of like self-worth kind of stuff that I just developed over the years of thinking I just was not good at things. Like I was like maybe I think I felt like I was dumb, like I was lazy, like all these different things. So there's that self-worth kind of stuff, the actual like challenges of executive functioning, being able to like take action on thoughts. Yeah, I guess it's two things. Was I going to say three things? I can't remember.
I
But
don't know, honestly.
maybe I think in my mind I was like, oh, here come three examples I'm going to give. It's like, oh, there's only two of them. Uh, but I think all that stuff kind of worked together to just kind of lead me to just continue making the same unaligned choices, habits that didn't. I have this thing. I think I showed it in a video. I'm trying to start saying this instead. Habits. Can you read it? It says habits that didn't serve me
Uh-huh.
instead of like bad financial choices. I'm like, oh, I had habits that didn't serve me that I'm changing now.
Hmm.
But so all these habits happen, and then it just became sort of normal that my finances were perpetually in chaos. Like it just seemed like, well, this is just how I am. So that's kind of how it got there. I totally lost track of what our question was. I feel extra ADHD today.
It's just being accentuated because of we're talking about it.
Yeah.
But I was asking like how that impacted your finances, like all the
Oh, yeah.
decisions, the impulse spending or whatever it was that because of ADHD.
Yeah, I mean, I think all that stuff happened, and the more exact cycle I think that was ADHD related was this sort of way of being that I was either broke or had money. Like it
Hmm.
was very black or white the way I imagined what my financial state was in any moment, and I
Hmm.
couldn't really figure out. I mean, for a lot of various reasons, how to get ahead. Partly because I would get paid and think, okay, I'm ahead now because look, there's money. And I'd be like,
Hmm.
okay, time to like break it down and like spend this money because I just got money. So let's go. So
Hmm.
it sounds super basic, but I think that was just really the extent of what I could slash would kind of regard with my finances. Like everything, and because everything was so behind, there was always like an immediate fire to put out. So there was no way to kind of get ahead
Hmm.
because I was in this sort of minute at a time sort of decision making about money. Like, and when I didn't have money, but I knew a payday was approaching, I'd be like, okay, well, on Friday, when I get this money, what am I going to do? What am I going to spend it on? And I couldn't kind of see the bigger picture or even think that there was going to be a way ever to plan for like a future time. Because I could only really, out of habit or ADHD, whatever, only think about the next thing,
Hmm.
very next thing.
I know that when we've worked together, overwhelm is a big thing that comes up too. Is that like when you were going through that, was it overwhelming to even look at everything? If you have like in the past, did you try to get your finances together before like all the debt and stuff, right? And was it
Yeah.
overwhelming?
Yeah. And I think like the way I reacted to Why can't I think of the Ramsey? What's his first name?
Dave.
Dave. Oh, I was
Good
right.
old Dave.
I think that's why his approach didn't help me because
Yeah.
it was so overwhelming to me to like look at that and have someone say, okay, so you can't. It was a lot about you can't do this, you can't do that. You're
Hmm.
broke, and here's your punishment. Is kind of how it landed with me.
Yeah.
And then, but he was talking to people who were not even as broke as I was. So
Hmm.
I was like, well, why am I even going to bother with this? Like, there's no way I'm going to get out of this if they can't
Yeah.
even do it. But it was self-perpetuating because I was the one making my situation overwhelming by not planning further ahead. But it was hard
Hmm.
to like see my own part in all of that. And I was just like, oh, I'm just broke. I just don't have like just because of it felt like it was just part of my like plan, like the playwright of my life was like, oh, this guy's just never going to have money.
Hmm.
I don't feel like it, and it's never like logical. Like when I try to explain some of this stuff, I'm like, oh, and P.S., don't try to make sense out of this
Hmm.
because it doesn't really.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of the reality I was allowing myself to see.
What helps you? Like, what advice for people with ADHD and money?
Um, I think like the the two biggest things that helped for me were not giving up. Like if I don't stick to my budget, I think the thing that I did before, and my sister could probably attest to this because she tried for a long time to help me budget. I would set
Hmm.
up my budget, and you're familiar with this too, especially this month, of
Hmm.
me like, well, yeah, this is how it happened. But now
Yeah.
I like, okay, so what's the next step to get back on track? But before, I would kind of just make my budget, screw it up, and be like, oh, well, budgeting doesn't work for me. So let's go back to, to what I did before. Were you asking what helped? What helped
Hmm.
with that?
Yeah, what helped and any
Oh,
like
yeah.
tips or
So
advice that
I
help
feel
you.
like I'm especially all over the place today.
It's okay.
I think
It fits. It
I
works.
know. I feel like it's my I don't know, my inner ADHD person is like, come on, let's really prove you have ADHD with this video.
That's
Um,
funny.
the thing that really helped, so yeah, my two things that really helped. One of them is not giving up. Like screw ups are inevitable for everyone, right? Like everyone is gonna overspend or
Hmm.
like something's gonna come up. Your budget is often, in my experience, gonna look entirely different at the end of the month than you thought it was gonna look at the beginning of the month for various reasons.
Hmm.
And you just go, you just do it again. You just keep going and regroup and okay, so it looks like this goal is gonna have to change now because I spent this money. So, okay, here's my new goal. Here's how I'm
Hmm.
gonna achieve it, and don't give up. So not giving up. And the other
Hmm.
thing for me is using you need a budget. YNAB is really like all that stuff I was saying about not being able to see the big picture. Somehow, like using YNAB, it takes the money you have on hand, and then you have to look and like figure, okay, like regardless of budget, like what I can spend this month, this is what what the plan is to spend this month. This is the money I actually have. What do I have to pay before I get money again?
Hmm.
And that's like a way of thinking that just doesn't still come naturally to me.
Hmm.
So going into the app and having to like, or if I spend money that wasn't planned, I have to like, okay, so if you don't fix this, you're gonna have something's gonna get returned. You're gonna have an overdraft.
Yeah.
So now you need to figure out where the money's coming from to cover this thing that you spent money on.
Hmm.
So those are my things, like finding like a structure like YNAB for me.
Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of like enhances my brain and kind of
Yeah.
helps me reel it in and see the bigger picture, and not giving up on it, returning.
What's interesting is I've spoken with multiple people who've tried to use YNAB,
Uh-huh.
but they said it was too overwhelming. So it's
Yeah.
like even when I've logged in, I think to yours and I think to somebody else's I've logged in or maybe like a similar app. And to me, it doesn't work with my brain.
Yeah.
Same with like that's why my spreadsheets are so simple because I've had some clients who like change up the spreadsheets, which is perfectly fine. I want it to work for them. But then for me, it's like very hard to comprehend. I'm like, okay, so what's this? So, because they'll
Yeah.
add like different colors or like position things differently. And to me, that's way more overwhelming. And I think the people who change it up like that, I honestly think they have ADHD. I think
Yeah.
just because the way they structured it is so much more complicated than it was originally, that I'm like, what? What is this? It's like a maze now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's just interesting to hear that YNAB worked for you. I guess it just takes like, you have to learn how to use it and then go from there. But yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard multiple times it's overwhelming, and it's overwhelming for me too.
Yeah. It was overwhelming for me too. I can't, oh,
Okay.
my friend Sean, who I just realized watches our podcast on YouTube.
Hi,
Um,
Sean.
Hi, Sean. Sean told me about YNAB.
Okay,
I think it was overwhelming for me first, but I think I got into my like sort of hyper focus with it.
I see.
And in a way, I think it was really good for me. Like this type of thing is good for me and not so good for what you were talking about overcomplicating it because you can
Hmm.
like yeah. So I had to think differently when I was setting it up. I thought it was going to be a thing of like, oh, I'm going to have this amount of money this month. So let me plan about this money I'm going to have. And I couldn't figure out like, wait, I can't how like it was confusing.
Okay.
But it's kind of to me, I using your spreadsheets and YNAB, like the spreadsheets kind of give me a plan of like, okay, this is what the plan is for the month.
Hmm.
And then YNAB is like the day to day, basically making the decisions or fixing the decisions I made before looking at YNAB.
Hmm.
It's less of a plan and more of like the reality of what my immediate like finances are.
Yeah.
Know if that just makes it easier or harder to understand.
No, I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So like for example, I overspent a lot on eating out
Hmm.
and I didn't have money assigned there in YNAB. So I had to like figure out, okay, so I just spent this money that wasn't planned for this. So now I have to being forced to make that happen is what's really good for me. Having to look at
Hmm.
it and be like, okay, so I spent money that isn't in this category. So now I don't know what's going to happen with my bank account. Something could bounce, something else could happen. So I have to figure out where the money is coming from for this purchase I made that wasn't planned. So I have to really
Hmm.
look at, okay, so the only place left is groceries. So
Hmm.
then this is coming out of my grocery money, or it's coming out of something else. It's basically
I see.
like a digital envelope system. I've heard people describe it as.
Yeah, I see. And
Yeah.
like balancing the difference between categories
Yeah.
as that happens. Makes
Yeah. And I
sense.
think one of my big problems with money was just like, oh, yeah, I'll figure it out. I'm going to spend this money and then I'll just figure it out later. But
Yeah.
not, I don't have unlimited money to just keep figuring it out. And Wine App kind of helps me realize, like, okay, so this is the point. This is where you figure it out. You can't just
Hmm.
kick the can down the road. Like, you have
Yeah.
to figure out how to make this work.
Kind of going back to social, like I think social media is a big problem. Like it's not even, I do not have ADHD, but I get very distracted from my phone or like, yeah, I have trouble staying on task. Like I really have to force myself to do that. And to me, it's not ADHD. It is just I live in a distracted world. So I feel like it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. I don't know what kids are going to be like. Like I'm scared for when I'm like 80, 90. Hopefully I live that long, and the people who like, will we have enough doctors? Because at that point, if the doctor's in surgery for like 8 hours, you have to focus for eight
Oh,
hours.
yeah.
And it's like things like that where will children of these days even be willing or able to do that because of all these distractions? And I think the combination of the, poor food that America has, the technology, yeah, just everything. It's kind of
Yeah.
scary.
I have like a hot take on that. I don't know if it's that
Okay.
hot, but I have a lukewarm take on that.
Okay. Love it.
Because I work with kids, so I
Yeah.
see a lot of these kids. And granted, like they're piano students, and the kids that I have that are old enough that I could potentially see if, there was, I don't know, some change in or like some problem with their use of social media.
Hmm.
I have a couple of high school kids. Well, set like two or three kids who are in high school, and all of them have taken piano from me for a while. Um, but they do okay. Like I feel like they practice, they make progress on the music they're working on. They see one of them comes and feeds my cat when I go out of town.
That's
Um,
awesome.
so I mean, and I only see them for like a half hour to an hour a week. So,
Hmm.
but I don't know. I think they're going to be okay. I think they might even, especially these younger ones.
They'll do
I think
better.
they're better at it in a way. I don't know how to describe it because they've always had it. So they've always had to sort of balance it with the other things.
Yeah.
Um, this is just from my personal experience and, you know, but I could also be entirely wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you're right. And we had actually talked about this when we were talking about the 90s. I
Yeah.
actually cut that part out because we like went on this whole tangent about this exact topic, so I can keep this in because on the other side of that, what I had even said during that conversation, my sister's a teacher, and
Mhm.
so I hear she was an eighth grade teacher for years, and right now she teaches high school. Yeah, what I hear from her, it's not positive, you know, like she's
Yeah.
around students 40 hours a week every week, and it is scary what I hear from her. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm more negative about the future of,
Yeah. She
the
probably has
children
a
now.
better perspective than I do because she sees the same kids every day for a longer period of time. Like they just have to focus with me for like a half hour to an hour.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing too is what you're doing is like extracurricular, and so maybe they actually like it.
Oh
Like
yeah.
hopefully they like it and want to be doing that. But students at school, which I understand, like a lot of people, I didn't like school, like I was fine in it, but you're being forced to do something.
Yeah.
And yeah, they having their phones and that sort of thing is very distracting to them.
Yeah.
And then just their behavior, just what I hear. And I think a lot of them do have ADHD and other things. I know that they're also very sensitive, like the way she describes things to me. Like they'll have panic attacks over very small things or just very emotional about very small things, which like that wasn't how it was back then, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember that being a kid.
Yeah. She told me one time that one of her students like lost their notebook. Like I think they draw in it, like doodle in it or something. And yeah, she had like a full-on panic attack, like had to leave class, go to the nurse or whatever, go home. If it's storming, like if it's thundering outside, a lot of them will freak out and have to go home. So
That's weird.
that's why I'm like, oh no. And I don't know if that's related to any of this per se, but it's just different
Yeah,
generations.
it really is interesting thing. And I'm glad you talked about your sister's experience because it made me realize like, oh yeah, I do see kids a lot, but very short amount of time doing
Hmm.
something they want to be doing. So
Yeah,
yeah, so my take and my point of view is very limited.
yeah. And actually, I wanted to look up stats around ADHD. How many people, let's say the US, an estimated 22 million people have ADHD, including 15.5 million adults and 6.5 million children. 6%, about 6% in 2023 of adults. The rate has increased over the last 2 decades. About one third of adults with ADHD took a medication in the previous year.
Mm.
So about as of 2022, about 11.4% of US children aged 3 to 17 were diagnosed with ADHD. That's pretty high, I would say.
Can you say that number one more time?
11.4% of US children. So that was 2022. So I'd imagine it's probably a little bit higher now.
There's so many questions about all of that, right? Like, are some of those kids being misdiagnosed?
I'm on an article, What's Driving the Rise? So let me see. Did the pandemic play a role in ADHD? Let's see. The pandemic did play a role. Increased mental health concerns, stress, anxiety, depression. These mental health concerns led to more diagnostic evaluations, which in turn led to increased ADHD diagnoses.
Oh,
Make sense? The core symptoms, inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. Yeah, I think really what did happen was more people were like, maybe I do have that, and then they go get evaluated. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's just naturally increased because of that.
And then during the pandemic, I feel like we all had more time to like, I've been meaning to go find out
Yeah.
they have XYZ happening. Now I
Hmm.
have time to, and then it's so much easier and more prevalent to do like virtual meeting.
Right.
Like I meet my therapist and my psychiatrist both on Zoom meetings, so it's all
Hmm.
gotten easier to like follow up on.
Yeah, that's true. This is kind of random, but I think we've talked about this before. How there was like a TikTok of this at some point, like trending, but how do you see like a calendar, the calendar year? How do you visualize that in your brain? Because I see it as like by the quarter, like if you were to buy or like type in calendar year 2025, it would be the 3 months, the 3 months, the three, by
Oh
quarter. That's how
yeah.
I see it, just stacked on top of each other.
I feel like mine is just a line that just keeps on going.
Okay. So like January through December.
Yeah, but it's not just
It's
one year.
forever.
It just keeps going like there's no ending. And I wonder if that it makes sense that I would feel overwhelmed by trying to look at the bigger picture when to
Hmm.
me it's just like, well, the big picture is just endless. Like there's no way I could look at the big picture because it just keeps on going.
Yeah. It's very interesting how people, and it's not something that you typically even think about, so it just,
Yeah. This is related, but perhaps a little tangential that the email that I use, Hey,
hmm.
has its own calendar system too, that I feel like I really want to get myself using, but it's linear. Like it puts the day in a timeline instead of up and down. Like,
Oh, no, I wouldn't like that.
yeah, but I keep telling myself, like, maybe there's something to this because they won't change it. Like, a lot of people say, oh, we'd really love your calendar, but like, nope, this is how our calendar works. Like,
Mm,
and it just sort of comes free with the software,
yeah.
with the email. So I think they just don't really care if people don't like it, but they're really like, no, this is how a calendar should be. And they're just
Hmm.
like really committed to it.
Hmm.
And I keep trying it every now and then, but it's really interesting.
Yeah. Whoever designed it, they must have like a different, because that's
Yeah.
strange. Typically it's like vertical how you see
Yeah.
things. So interesting.
But I think it's one of those, like when you look back, like that layout is the same as we had in paper calendars, paper planners. So I wonder if they're like, it never should have looked like that, but that's the only way it would work on paper. Now we have a way to lay it out this way, and that's how it should. I don't
Mm,
know. I haven't
that's
listened to it,
true.
but it's really interesting that I like that video makes me think of it too. Like maybe there's really something to this. I should try it again.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. I don't know. That's interesting. I mean, yeah, it is all just like made up stuff anyway, but
Yeah.
the way that I think I just follow like the expected norm because
Yeah.
that's how I see it.
Sometimes I think, and I was thinking about this when we were talking about YNAB and people who really make theirs very detailed.
Hmm.
I think I can find myself, I do this with my music writing too. When I learned how to do electronic music, I was learning this software for like a year. And then I was like, wait, I haven't made any music with this. I
Mm,
just keep learning it.
yeah,
And I'm spending all this energy on learning. Like, I know how to use it now. You don't need to learn any more things. Now use
right.
it as it's intended to be used. And that's
Hmm.
what happens with me when I first started using YNAB, especially, and with this calendar thing, where I start like, I think my brain is like, oh, here's a way that I could trick you into procrastinating finishing this task. You really need to like restructure your YNAB and add emojis. Let's definitely need some emojis in here. So let's sidetrack everything else
Yeah,
and
yeah.
start working on this tool instead of using the tool for what it's created for.
Hmm. Does it help you to have like a routine as well, just in general, or just
Yes.
in daily life?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think routine is a really big thing.
Yeah.
But it's like a problem when avoiding and procrastinating becomes routine. Hard to
Hmm.
break it. But I think that's with everybody.
Do you struggle with, because for you, your line of work is like you've got to be there, you've got to teach it. Like this, you can't really get distracted, you know? Like it's
Yeah.
not, oh, you have this task to do. So that's helpful, I would imagine. But
Yeah.
with those things where it's you have to do something, how do you make yourself focus?
I think like in my teaching, and this is one of the relationship things too that I realized, like I have my afternoon of teaching, and in between I travel to people's houses, so I walk in between lessons. So that I think that's super helpful for me. Um, but I think I just know, like I've trained myself, like, okay, this is a piano lesson. You're working with a kid. You have to have X amount of patience. You have to like focus now. Like I think I just get in the habit and the routine. And but then at the end of the day, like a lot of times when my first started dating my boyfriend, he would call, I'd call him when I got home, and I didn't have any more like patience because I've
Hmm.
so it was very like, oh, I can't talk to him until after I like get home, like whatever, change my clothes, eat, blah blah blah. Like I could do a
Hmm.
quick like, hey, I just made it home, blah blah blah. I'm about to eat my dinner. I'll call you when I'm done. Because I think it takes a lot of energy for anybody to like work with kids or whatever your job is.
Hmm.
Um, so I think it takes a lot of energy for me to do what you're talking about of like remembering to stay focused. And
Hmm.
then when the time is up for that energy to have to be spent, it's really up. And it's like, okay, like I have to not really talk to anybody for a little while.
Hmm. I see. And do you think that's are you introverted? Would you say you're introverted or extroverted?
Uh, I think I've been both, and I'm more introverted now than I used to be.
Yeah, because I feel like that's kind of like when you talk to people a lot, or if you're around a lot of people, you kind of need that, like, okay, it's time to rest, recover. I don't
Yeah,
want to hear anybody. Yeah, so that's maybe
yeah,
introvert coming in too with everything.
yeah. What are you introverted?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I can be like, it doesn't mean I'm like, I think a lot of people think
yeah,
introverts are like super shy and, like I can talk to people and that's fine, but it is a bit draining.
yeah,
Yeah, so I'll just need like I prefer being home, definitely. Like I'm more of a homebody.
yeah,
I don't need a lot of people.
yeah.
Anything else that's like important with ADHD or your experience?
I feel like we've covered everything.
Yeah. And we kind of were all over the place, and that's very fitting
Yeah,
for it felt all over the place anyway, but I think it's
it'll
very
be
fitting for
perfect for our ADHD audience.
yes, yes. They're
But I think
like,
typically
no.
it's either good or bad. Like it's, I think in some ways it's like they don't have time to get bored with the topic.
True.
And when in doubt, they can be like, wait, why are they talking about this?
This has nothing to do with ADHD. We
I
tend
feel
to
like
go on these tangents.
this is sort of the emerging style of this podcast, though. It feels like of like,
Yeah.
let's start with a topic and kind of find out where we land
Yeah, yeah.
on.
We stayed on topic, I think, for the most
Yeah.
part. So, okay.
All right.
Well, thanks y'all for watching. Thumbs up, subscribe, comment, review. We are on Spotify. Working on getting it to everything else. I'm probably saying that we're like on episode, I don't know, but it's taking some time. It hasn't been working, so, but it's on Spotify. So leave a review. And thank you for listening, for watching.
Thanks for watching, listening, following our tangents.
Yes.
We'll see you next time.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.